afternoon. It is Friday, February 14th. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. Officials gather at BL on the 9th anniversary of the assassination of Mr. Rafiq Hariri to reaffirm their support for the International Tribunal. UN Humanitarian Chief Valerie Amos praises Homs's evacuation but warns that 250,000 citizens are still trapped inside Syria. And a former chief of Libya's military is calling for disbanding the country's parliament and government. They're calling it a coup. U.S. Ambassador David Hale was one of the officials to visit former Premier Rafiq Hariri's resting place in downtown Beirut on the 9th anniversary of the assassination, as the mission reaffirms its support for the efforts exerted by the International Tribunal. Hale toured the Mohammed Al-Amin Mosque and the memorial to reflect on the period he called in Lebanon a very tough one, and also to pay respect to the deceased. He said he reaffirmed the support for the Special Tribunal for Lebanon's efforts to hold accountable those responsible for destabilizing the acts of violence. The absentia trial in Hariri's February 14, 2005 assassination started mid-January. Back in 2011, the STL indicted 4 Hezbollah members, Mustafa Badreddin, Salim Ayash, Hussein Unaisi, and Asad Sabra. A 5th Hezbollah suspect, Hassan Midhi, was indicted in 2013, and the STL trial chamber decided on Monday to join the case against Midhi with the case against the 4 other suspects. And now to discuss the latest developments in the country, we have joining us civil society activist Sarah Assaf, who is at the commemoration ceremony in BL. Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sarah, I want to ask you, where are we today, and what do you think happened to the dream of Rafiq Hariri?
I think so far the dream is shattered. I mean, we're going backwards in Lebanon since 9 years ago on all levels, if you want, politically wise, economically wise, socially wise, security wise. Everything's going backward now, and I mean, it's a very sad thing to realize today, and we're here after 9 years, and there's nothing really positive to say.
At all, there's nothing positive to say. Do you think we are headed towards justice with the International Tribunal for Lebanon?
I think the Special Tribunal for Lebanon is the only real victory that March 14 was able to get since 14 February 2005. I think it's great that it's going in the right direction. I think all the pressure that is being exerted inside will not really influence the course of this tribunal, and this is the only thing we can be proud of, and the only thing that we should always make sure not to harm, if you want, because some things are happening now that are a bit tarnishing the whole image of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon.
I know, and you talk about March 14, and I know you're also a very prominent supporter of the March 14, and once we were discussing this, you said the initial March 14 as opposed to what March 14 is today. Can you comment on that?
Excuse me, I couldn't hear the question.
I was saying that I know that you are a very prominent supporter of March 14, but you always said that
yes,
you were a prominent supporter of the original March 14, not very much what it is today.
Exactly.
Can you comment on that?
Exactly. Yeah, of course. I have a big problem, Yumna, and I think I'm not the only one. I have a big problem with where March 14 is today. When I say that I'm with March 14, I'm with March 14, the values of this day, of March 14, 2005, and the people of March 14, 2005. A lot of things that are happening today are not really in line with the values of March 14, and this is where I have a problem. I will tell you something, Yumna. I'm not sure if this happened by coincidence, or if it was like well thought of, but I think it's a blessing that the government did not happen today. I mean, imagine that a government with Hezbollah, who's indicted by the Special Tribunal of Lebanon for the murder of Rafiq Hariri, imagine that a government between March 14 and between Hezbollah, imagine if it was formed today, on the day of the commemoration of Rafiq Hariri. I mean, the symbolism of it is so sad.
Speaking of what you just said, the formation of the government, we're going into 11 months without a government or a cabinet. So where do you think the political situation is headed right now?
There's a high probability that the government will be formed in the coming 2 days, but I think the whole political situation, I think I told you before, Yumna, I believe that this government is not really going to change anything on all the levels. We talked about a problem security-wise, financially-wise, economically-wise, and I think this problem is bound to stay even if there's a government, because there was a government before that was headed by Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, and a government before that was headed by Prime Minister Signora, and still there was never really a solution. We're going backwards. I think the problem is that there's an army, that there's a party in Lebanon, a militia that is armed while all the others are not. We are not able to negotiate with them anything. We are not able to really advance in this country. And I think that what needs to be done is not now to go, and make more concessions and sit with them. I think what really we should be doing is stick where we are, take very, very strong stance against what's happening, against their arms, and try to lobby, like I told you also before, Yumna, try to lobby regionally, globally, and try to really say that we need to make out of Lebanon a neutral country, something, an action that would neutralize Lebanon and that would also neutralize Hezbollah.
I have one last question for you. I know you talk about, it's not time to make concessions, but people are saying because of the current wave of violence in the country and the level at which it has escalated, it's actually time to come together and to try to secure Lebanon and perhaps try to make it a little more stable. So what do you have to say about that?
I would say that a joint government with Hezbollah was formed before, Yumna, and many martyrs from March 14 were killed during joint governments with Hezbollah. I believe the situation, the security, the lack of security in Lebanon now is not due. A government will not really make a difference, because what we have today is the result of Hezbollah's involvement in Syria. As long as Hezbollah is involved in Syria, terrorism is blossoming all around, and it's happening, and it's coming to Lebanon, and this is what's happening today. So I don't believe that a government with Hezbollah will really, with Hezbollah will make any change as long as Hezbollah is still present in Syria. Those terrorists, Yumna, the people who are going and blowing themselves in Dahieh and blowing themselves in Hermel, they do not report to March 14. They do not report to the leaders of March 14. So even if those leaders form a government with Hezbollah, nothing's going to really change.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. That was Sara Assaf talking live from Biel, where they're commemorating ex-Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri. And we move on with the news. UN Humanitarian Chief Valerie Amos says the evacuation of civilians from the besieged Syrian city of Homs is remarkable and a remarkable achievement, but she warns 250,000 people across the country still await help. Amos says the Homs operation should not serve as a model for future efforts. She claims it was a success given the extremely difficult circumstances, but not a progress. She also tells reporters that the UN had received verbal assurances from both sides in the conflict that the truce around Homs would be extended. However, officials still await written confirmation. Amos has called on the 15-member UN Security Council to use their influence over parties to ensure they abide by pauses, give the right humanitarian access, and commit in writing to upholding international humanitarian laws. She expressed frustration at the extremely limited and slow progress. Coming up next for Valentine's Day, the love story of a penguin and her keeper. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. A former chief of Libya's military has called for disbanding the country's parliament and government in a video message 3 days after the defense minister warned that a coup attempt had been foiled. General Khalifa Haftar was appointed army chief after the 2011 ouster of Muammar Gaddafi, but was removed soon after. He has been known little since, and it is not known how much support he has among Libya's multiple armed factions. In the specific video posted to YouTube, Haftar appeared in uniform and read a 5-point plan to rescue the nation, including the creation of a presidential committee representing the country's political factions and a national defense council under his command. Prime Minister Ali Zidane described the statement as laughable, accusing Haftar of speaking with the language of a coup. Yemeni security forces have been hunting down 29 inmates, including 19 suspected al-Qaeda members who broke out of jail in a deadly assault in the capital just yesterday. Reports say people convicted of various terrorist and criminal charges escaped when a blast breached the facility's outer wall. Gunmen attacked guards at the main entrance as the explosive laden vehicle detonated, creating a diversion that allowed some prisoners to escape through a hole. Now, 7 members of the security forces were killed and 4 wounded in the assault. A ministry spokesman tells reporters that 19 of those who broke out are accused of committing terrorist acts. Officials say the prison holds around 5,000 inmates. In other world news, 2 people have been killed and thousands evacuated in Indonesia after the eruption of Mount Khulud on densely populated Java Island, spewing ash and gravel onto nearby towns and cities. 3 international airports have also been closed due to reduced visibility and the danger posed to aircraft engines by ash. The country's volcano monitoring agency has urged about 200,000 people living in 36 surrounding villages of the crater to leave their homes. Reports say the initial blast sent millions of cubic meters of dust and rocks into the atmosphere and could be heard up to 200 kilometers away. Ash up to 2.5 centimeters deep covered Surabaya, the country's second largest city, and even farther afield in Jakarta, where motorists had to switch on headlights in daylight. The 1731-meter-high volcano had been rumbling for several weeks and is among about 130 active volcanoes in Indonesia. The UN Children's Agency says it is horrified at how children are being maimed and killed in sectarian violence engulfing the Central African Republic. At least 133 children have been killed and maimed, some of them in horrific ways in the past 2 months, and UNICEF has verified cases of children intentionally beheaded and mutilated. Many wounded have often not been able to get to the hospital for treatment because of the violence. The Central African Republic has been steadily descending into chaos ever since a coup by the Salika rebel coalition a year ago installed the first Muslim president in the majority Christian nation. He has since stepped down. Killings by former Salika rebels led to the formation of mostly Christian anti-Balaka militias, whose attacks have fueled an exodus of Muslims from the country over the past several weeks. And Facebook has announced that it will allow users to customize their gender after consulting on the subject with gay and transgender advocacy groups. Facebook tells reporters the 50-odd options, which include bigender, transgender, androgynous, and transsexual, will allow people to express themselves in an authentic way. Users can also choose whether to be referred to as he, she, or they. The new options will initially only be for those using the site in U.S. English Facebook, and says that the new options are formulated after consultations with 5 leading gay and transgender rights organizations. Reports say the move reflects the growing influence of the transgender rights movement in the U.S., which is demanding similar civil rights to the gay community. One estimate in a report by the Williams Institute think tank in 2011 said that an estimated 700,000 people in the U.S. are transgender. And a video showing the unlikely love match between a penguin and her keeper has shot the pair to internet stardom, and just in time for Valentine's Day. The brief but adorable footage shows a 10-year-old female Sakura following right on the heels of Tsushoi Nutsu at the Matsuvogal Park Bird Center in Japan. Smiling for the camera, Mr. Notsu starts running and Sakura gives chase, desperate to stay as close to him as she possibly can. She strikes courting poses, and at one point, when appearing to fall over, well, she's actually assuming a breeding position. According to reports in the local Minashi Daily News, Sakura's mate Musashi died last October, and she spent months searching for her partner, but in December appeared to have given up. The video clip is cut short at 36 seconds when park visitors walk in on the affair, but it has been viewed more than 150,000 times in the past 24 hours after it was posted on YouTube. And on that note, let me remind you of our headlines. Officials gather at Biel on the 9th anniversary of the assassination of former Prime Minister Rafik Hariri to reaffirm their support for the International Tribunal. UN Humanitarian Chief Valerie Amos praises Homs's evacuation but warns that 250,000 citizens are still trapped in Syria. And a former chief of Libya's military is calling for disbanding the country's parliament and government. Those are your Friday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Naufal, wishing you a great weekend ahead. Take care.
داعش وحزب الله والنظام 3 وجوه لعملة واحدة.